Last evening we talked about the need for doing organized personal work. I know that those of you here last evening were already sold on the need, but I wanted to sell you again, or even more so on the need. If my brethren see a need for doing something, they'll get it done. If they don't see the need, they won't. And so that's the reason that we spent one lesson last evening just talking about the grave need that we have for getting busy, leading souls to Jesus Christ. If I were to ask you this evening, what is the greatest need in the church, in the brotherhood of the churches of Christ, what would you tell me? In some places, I have brethren answer like this, and they'll say we need bigger and better buildings, more commodious facilities. I realize that's a grave need, but I want you to know the gravest need that we have in the churches of Christ today is not bigger and better buildings. Some would say that we need an eldership with more leadership, more oversight, and more vision. I realize that too is a grave need, but it's not the gravest need that we have in the churches of Christ. Others would say we need a better trained ministry, more capable men to stand in the pulpits. And I grant you that is a need too, but it's not the gravest need. The one single gravest need that we have in the church today is soul winners for Jesus Christ. Personal workers. Each convert becoming a preacher and going out and converting someone else. And if the whole world's ever taken for Christ, it'll be when we get back to that fundamental concept of each one of us being priests and kings before God. Revelation 1 verses 5 and 6. Each one of us realizing that we are a part of the royal priesthood, that we are to go out and to lead souls to Christ. We have slipped into the habit of having a clergy to do our work for us. And as I suggested last evening, I know that it's unscriptural, but we have one anyway. And the only difference between us and people of denominations is that they're honest enough to admit they have a clergy. We keep saying, oh, it's not scriptural and we can't have one, but you know that we do. And you know we hire our professional clergymen to do our work for us, and we're going to have to get away from that concept. 150 years ago, a New Orleans newspaper wrote this editorial about Alexander Campbell. I'm going to quote their words. It will be their words, not mine. They said, and I quote, "The reason Alexander Campbell's new religion is growing so rapidly is because every time he makes a convert, that convert becomes a preacher and goes out and converts someone else." End of quotation. Well, you know, I read something like that in the New Testament. Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven is likened unto leaven, in that a little leaven leaveneth a whole lump. What is the property of leaven? Most of us can remember when our mothers used to take the live dough and put it in with some other, and that before long the whole lump would be leavened. A property of leaven is not that it's able to go in as a minority into a big lump of dough that's a majority and be able to hold its own. That's not a property of leavening. It would be worthless to us if all it could do was hold its own. But the property of leavening that Jesus had in mind is that each molecule of that leavening leavens the molecule next to it, and that one next to it, and before long the whole lump is leavened. And the trouble in the churches of Christ today, we have so many molecules that aren't functioning, and they're not leavening the one next to them. Did you ever stop to think that you never saw an ad of Hershey chocolate in your life? You've never on radio, television, billboards, or anywhere else seen an ad for Hershey chocolate. Do you know why? Because they don't have to advertise. Why don't they have to advertise? Because they consistently put out a good product. And that product is its own advertising. Hershey chocolate has never spent one dime advertising in their life, and I doubt that they ever will. But we have some pretty bad samples of Christianity in the church, and it takes an awful lot of advertising to try to overcome the effect and the influence of it. And toward the latter end of this lesson tonight, I hope I have time to talk to you more in detail about that. Now, I suggested last evening that my brethren will do as well as they have been taught. You may think I'm a bit harsh and a bit crude sometimes, but I want you to know there's one thing I won't do. I will not stand in the pulpit and lambaste my brethren for not doing personal work without providing the means for training them. I just haven't got the heart to do that. I believe my brethren will lead souls to Christ if you'll just train them how. I think in my short experience as a gospel minister, I've proven that. I have never labored but with 3 congregations as the evangelist, and all 3 of them have doubled their membership within 2 years from the time I went there. And I didn't do it all. I trained some brethren how, and they did it. Now, brethren, just look what that'd do for the brotherhood today if preachers would just quit preaching for a little while, long enough to train their members how to lead others to Christ. We could double the entire membership of the church in 2 years. It'll not only work in Edmondson, Plainview, and Abilene, but it'll work anywhere else. So so we have to train them. That takes some time. Most of us in too big a hurry. And so we'll get up and preach some sermons, trying to scare the brethren into doing personal work. We do not provide any training for them. They go out to try to do personal work. They're a miserable failure. They do more harm than good. And thus they become despondent and discouraged. So tonight I want to talk to you about an organized training program for workers. Lesson number 2, page 8. Let's read the introduction together. Training is an essential part of Christianity. Jesus took 12 hand-picked men and gave them intensive training for nearly 3 years. The Christian life has been likened to a soldier, an athlete. Both of these pursuits require diligent training if the desired end is to be accomplished. And so it is with the Christian. Without proper training, some may do more harm than good in visiting or in attempting to do personal teaching. And the purpose of this lesson is to set forth a general plan of training that will fill the needs of most any congregation. Now, you'll have to adapt it, of course, to your own particular needs. But in a general way, I'm going to outline to you here, as I have on these pages, 3 steps that I believe you're going to have if you have a successful soul-saving program. The Roman numeral 1 is a personal work director. We'll come back to him in a minute. Roman numeral 2 on page 9, a class at the church building. And Roman numeral 3, training in the homes of the members. That's what I want to talk to you about tonight. Now then, the personal work director. Brethren, I'm not trying to bring an office into the church. This is not a proper name. This is an adjective phrase. It describes what he does. Personal work director, someone in charge. Someone has to be. I don't care what kind of program you have, someone's going to have to be in charge. So you can call him the man in charge of personal evangelism if it will make you feel any better. I just brought it down to 3 words, personal work director. Someone has to direct the personal work program. Now then, I suggest that he may be the preacher, he may be an elder, he may be a deacon, or he may be someone else. I want to suggest this too, that anyone that's preaching for a congregation of 150 members does not have time to be the pulpit evangelist and the personal work director and do a good job of both. Now, I just set that up as 150 from experience. They're both full-time jobs. The preacher just can't do both jobs. No man can do 2 full-time jobs and do them both well. Now, many times, if it's done, the preacher will have to do it. But I just want to say, don't think you can saddle the preacher with this and really have a satisfactory program, because if he's doing a good job preaching, he just hasn't got time for this. Now, I suggest very strongly you be sure you get the right man in. And if you can't find the right man, don't put one in. You're not ready to start yet. Maybe an elder, that would be wonderful, provided that he has proven by his life that he loves the souls of men more than he loves wagon train, gun smoke, I Love Lucy, whatever else that my brethren like to look at. That he's proven it by his life, that he loves the souls of men more than he loves the one-eyed monster called television. And how does he prove it? By spending more time with the souls of men than he does with entertainment. Brethren, I cannot overemphasize, don't you put the wrong man in here. He is the key man. Be careful who you put in. We have started many personal work programs in a lot of congregations and helped the brethren, assisted them in getting them started. I've seen some of them die already because they put the wrong man in as personal work director, and he sat on the lid and smothered the life out of the program. Whoever you put in here, be sure that he doesn't have tired blood. He must be a man with some vim, vigor, and vitality. He may be a deacon, he may be somebody else, but be sure that he loves the souls of men, and he's proven it by his life. He must be consecrated to the Lord. He must be a man of vision. He must be a man of zeal. Now then, here are some of his duties, as I see it, that he'll have to fulfill. Number 1, teach these prospective teachers how to overcome obstacles. I'll come back to that in a few minutes, and we'll teach you about overcoming some of these obstacles here. He is also supposed to instill the proper attitude into the hearts and minds of the teachers. One of his jobs. How can he teach something that he himself does not know? So he has to learn it first, you see. Be careful who you put in. And then, the number 3, keeping accurate records of classes and progress being made. My elders want to know how many classes we got going on, who's teaching, how many you got in training. So I keep records on this. Do demonstration teaching. The personal work director, he can teach you how to teach. Then he can take you out on a cottage meeting and on some calls and let you see it in action. And that just helps so much to be able to see and to actually sit in on a cottage meeting. So he needs to do demonstration teaching. You know, when these two Mormon elders come to your door to call on you, that Book of Mormon isn't so heavy that it takes both of them to carry it. One of them is an old hand, and he's doing demonstration teaching for the other one. When these two insurance salesmen call on you, it doesn't take both of them to carry that portfolio. One is teaching the other one how to sell. Jesus knew what he was doing when he sent his disciples out in pairs. So I do demonstration teaching when I can. Assist in arranging classes. Now we're going to have one lesson, let's see, tomorrow night, on how do you get somebody to let you teach them after you've gone to the trouble to learn how. And getting that first class started is quite a problem. And until you catch on how to make contacts, it's just quite a problem. So the personal work director is to assist his students to get a class started, getting them together. You know, it's just almost impossible for me to go out and start a cottage meeting for you. And it's almost impossible for you to go start one for me. I can meet someone, and first thing you know, we're in a religious discussion. That's the easiest thing in the world, to get someone in a religious discussion, and we're just getting along fine, and here's an opening to start a cottage meeting, and I don't have enough time. I can't put it in. I don't have any time off. And I can't say, I know an old boy over here, that he'll make a good teacher. Well, they don't even know him. They wouldn't let him in the house. So what I do, I get a prospect set up, and then I take one of my students with me. If I can just get the first cottage meeting started, the first night, I said, say I have a deacon that wants to come with me. Would it be all right to bring him? Why, sure. They know me. It's all right to bring him. So I bring him, and we have a lesson together, and they get acquainted. Then I usually invite them over to my house. Why don't you and your wife come over to my house for dinner next Tuesday evening, 6 o'clock? And I'll invite the deacon and his wife to come, and so they get acquainted. And then when I have to be out of town, this fellow can go ahead and teach the cottage meeting. But as far as just getting it started and sending him over there, I just can't do it. So we have to handle these first ones with a great deal of finesse. And you need to teach people how to get people in cottage meetings. We'll talk about it tomorrow night more in detail. You need to sit in on the first class taught by the beginner. That makes him feel good just to know there's a spare tire there. Just in case something comes up he doesn't know how to handle, well, he feels sure you do. Of course, you don't either, but it makes him feel good to know you're there. And so if you sit in while he teaches the first class, then he's ready to solo now. He'll be on his own. Assist in motivating the students to action after he has been taught. I spend a lot of my time doing just that. My brothers and sisters in Christ at home will teach someone, and they know what to do, but they just don't go ahead and do it. And so they come and talk with me, and I admit I've taught this person, they know and understand, but I haven't been able to baptize them. And so I assist them in closing the sale. That's what we're going to talk about Thursday night. How do you get somebody to obey the gospel after you've taught them? One of the finer points of salesmanship. We'll talk about it Thursday night. And so you need to assist them. They need to learn how to close the sale. See that the proper tracts are mailed weekly. Here are a list of tracts that deal with the subjects that we teach, that I like to either give them at the cottage meeting, mail them, or drop in on them socially and leave them a tract. Now that's for the personal work director. That's the Roman numeral 1. That's the first step for an organized training program. Somebody in charge of it. Somebody with some vim, vigor, and vitality. Consecrated, dedicated, loves the souls of men. Will give himself to the salvation of the souls of men. Now, the Roman numeral 2. If you are going to have a successful soul-saving program in the congregation where you worship, you are going to have a class at the church building each week. You just as well put it in your curriculum. And just be sure, as you say, now we're going to have it for 12 weeks, and let's study one of these books. And you study it for 12 weeks, you're going to build up a little bit of interest. Then you quit having that class, and you're going to find that your interest just goes down, down, down. And you'll be right back where you started. As I mentioned to you last evening, Jehovah's Witnesses have ministers training school every Friday night. No one ever gets good enough to graduate. That's the reason they are the most militant, and I believe perhaps the most efficient personal workers that we have in the world today. Did you know that it takes more teaching to make one a Jehovah's Witness than it does to make one a Christian? And they never get through going to minister training school. They continue to go every Friday night and study how to better be personal workers or witnesses for Jehovah, as they like to be designated. Now, when should this class at the church building meet? Well, of course, we'd have to leave that up to your discretion. I have taught it Sunday morning during the Bible study period. I have taught it Sunday evening after the evening worship. I have taught it Monday evening, Tuesday evening, and Wednesday evening. Now, those are the only times I can remember ever having taught a course on personal work at the church. What works the best? I have found this, in my experience, to be the ideal time. If you have your Sunday evening services at 6, then have your personal worker training school immediately after the Sunday evening worship. People are already dressed. They're already at the meeting house. It's too early to go home. It's too late to go anywhere else. And so just about as ideal a time as you can find. And I find that I have the best attendance by having it Sunday evening after the evening worship. What material should you use in this class? Now, before I talk about materials, brethren, I want to tell you something. The one that teaches this class more than likely will be the personal work director. He doesn't have to. If you've got a lot of ability in the congregation, you've got someone that can teach it and someone else to oversee it, that's fine. So I think in every case that I've ever heard of, the personal work director did the teaching of the class. Now, you be sure you make this class at the church building a good class, a thrilling class, a practical class. My brethren will come if you and I will feed them something when they come. And if we have our lesson very ill prepared and not much material in it anyway, they're going to quit coming, and I don't blame them. This is a busy world in which we live. Society makes a lot of demands upon us, pressures from our family and from business and from social circles upon us. Now, brethren, if you will have a good lesson, one that's practical, got some meat in it, and presented in a zealous, enthusiastic way, the brethren will come. I don't care what time you have it, they'll come. When I go to teach a class, and I begin to see vacant seats showing up out in the class, I don't get angry with the class. I know where the problem is. It's right up here. I go to preach for a congregation. If I should see vacant seats start showing up out in the audience, I wouldn't get angry with the congregation. I know where the problem is. It's right up here. Charles Spurgeon, I believe, was one of the greatest Baptist preachers that ever lived. Mr. Spurgeon used to preach in the London Tabernacle every Sunday to some 10 or 12,000 people. This is a peculiar church, or was. Every Sunday morning, this was a standard announcement that was made in the London Tabernacle. The man who made the announcements would say, now, we're happy to have all of you folks that have come this morning, but we'd like to make this request of you. Please don't come back to church tonight. And let some of the folks get in to hear Brother Spurgeon that couldn't hear him this morning. Isn't that kind of strange? To get up instead of begging people to come back? Please don't come back tonight. You've got to hear him today. Let someone else get in that couldn't get in. Well, you know, when a man is that successful, I want to know, what does he have? And so I read it one day in his works. Mr. Spurgeon says that when someone goes to sleep when I'm preaching, don't wake him up, wake me up. And anytime I see someone dozing when I'm preaching, I know, Mid, if you'd spent more time in the preparation of that lesson, you'd have something more practical and worthwhile and presented it in a zealous and enthusiastic manner, he would have stayed awake. So I don't get angry. I used to when I first started preaching. I thought it was a personal affront. But I know where the problem is. It's up here. When you start teaching this class, you be sure the lessons are practical. Well, then what am I going to use? I use this book. I wrote it. I like it. But I also recommended 8 others in the front of it, all written by my brethren, all of them good. Use them if you like. I also suggested to you that we have put this training school that you're engaging in now into 16mm movies. There would be 8 weeks of pretty good material. Also, Brother Joe Miller has put out a training series, cottage meeting training series, 12 black and white film strips on cottage meeting work. These are materials that I wanted to suggest to you that are written by the brethren. Now, people of the denominational publishing houses have some excellent material on personal work for the personal work director. And he can take it and adapt it for the class. It'll scare the brethren to death, of course, if they see somebody else's publishing house print on it, they know the material's good. So I take it, and then I make my own lessons out of it, and pass it out, and the brethren think I'm so smart. I don't tell them where it came from. Well, they wouldn't want to believe it if I did. But anything that's good that we can use, let's use it. Now then, we've talked about the first 2 here. Personal work director, class at the church building.